Hello my lovelies, how are we all today? I hope you guys are having a great day. Welcome or welcome back to Trapped by Love. My name is Emma Carrington, and if you're interested in true crime and justice, then you're in the right place. By way of a disclaimer, we discuss true crime cases involving domestic abuse and domestic homicide on this channel. So if that's not the kind of content you were looking for, I completely understand. And thanks for stopping by. If you do stick around, I hope you consider hitting that subscribe button. It helps us to push these videos out to more people. And by doing so, together we can spread awareness of the warning signs of domestic abuse that people may otherwise overlook. So, in saying that, thanks for your help and support. Now let's go ahead and get into today's case. Today we're going to be discussing the case of Yvonne Baldelli. Yvonne was born on the 4th of March and grew up in California with her older siblings, a sister and a brother. Yvonne was a dog lover and a happy, free spirit with an infectious smile. However, in 2009, she was nearing her 40s. Yvonne was recently divorced and, according to her family, seemed a little lost. She hadn't found her passion in life. She had great friends and a loving family and held a management position with Procter & Gamble, but she was still just treading water. It was around this time that she met a man that she was extremely taken with. Brian Brimmager was his name, and he was a 6'2" ex-Marine from the Midwest. The two of them started dating in 2009. They broke up and then got back together a number of times. There were many issues in this relationship, the biggest being the fact that Brian was married. It was unclear if Yvonne was aware of the marriage when they began seeing each other. However, at some point she did become aware, and she let his wife know all about her relationship with Brian and the relationship he was having with another woman as well. This other woman's name was Kristen, and we'll get to her shortly. After this, Brian and his wife divorced, and he and Yvonne continued an on and off relationship. That, of course, didn't mean that he was faithful to her. Whether she was aware of that at the time, again, is unclear. But Brian came home one day, seemingly 100% ready to commit. He told her he was retiring and he wanted them to move to Panama. So, in September of 2011, Yvonne sold everything she owned in California and headed off for a fresh start with the love of her life, taking little more than 2 sewing machines with the hopes of beginning a business of designing and making clothes to sell on the beach, and her beloved King Charles Spaniel, Georgia May. It wasn't long for this fresh start in paradise to go from a party to a daily hell. However, this was not the picture Yvonne was painting for her family back home. She was in contact, pretty much constant contact, particularly with her sister Michelle. And Yvonne described the amazing, idyllic life she was living with Brian in her many calls and emails. This wasn't what the locals were witnessing. The people who lived on the island with the couple have said that they argued almost constantly. Their landlord spoke of Yvonne's jealousy. I mean, can you blame her? She knows what this guy's like. The landlord also tells of an incident where Yvonne came knocking on her door asking if she could use her master key, as Brian had locked her out of their apartment. Numerous witnesses saw Brian punch, strangle and kick Yvonne on many occasions. Their neighbour could hear the assaults through the walls. When people came to Yvonne to see if they could help her, she never denied the violence. She merely told them that she could handle it. The couple had been in Panama for a little over a month when on November the 8th, an argument broke out. During this argument, Yvonne hit Brian with his laptop. After this, their neighbour heard Yvonne screaming and multiple thuds before everything fell silent. All was quiet and no one saw Yvonne for days. But then 2 days later, she and Brian were both seen in town. Yvonne was conspicuously hiding her face behind large sunglasses. What she was hiding was a dark bruise to her left eye. She took photos of the injury and they were stored on her laptop. Yvonne and Brian were both now sharing a laptop because when she'd hit him, she'd broken his. And this is when, if she hadn't already had the gut feeling before, Yvonne's suspicions of Brian's unfaithful tendencies were confirmed. She saw that he was emailing his mistress that she had previously informed his wife about. That wasn't the whole story though. The mistress, Kristen, that we spoke about earlier, had a child, and Brian was the father of this child. And the child was born in 2010, even though Brian and Yvonne had been seeing each other since 2009. So she was a little upset. She saw that he'd been writing to Kristen the whole time that they'd been in Panama. So what was he writing? He was writing that he was coming back and they were going to be a family. He was going to help raise their daughter. Yeah, can imagine the father figure he was going to be. All the while, Yvonne had no idea that he had a daughter or any plans to leave Panama. On the 26th of November, 2011, Yvonne woke Brian up, irate at what she'd found. Can you imagine? You've just uprooted your life for someone, moved away with them, put up with their abuse and infidelity, thinking that you are building a future with them, only to find out that they have a whole other life and they plan on leaving you behind to go and live it. Of course she's pissed, but beyond this, she was heartbroken. Yvonne was unable to have children, so Brian's continued affair was one thing, but his secret child just added insult to injury. As you can probably guess, this argument escalated. Yvonne apparently sat down at her computer to write a letter, and then all was quiet for a couple of weeks. Brian flew back into San Diego a few months later alone. He came back and had to face Yvonne's sister Michelle because before they'd left, Brian had left his truck with her for safekeeping. Michelle hadn't heard from Yvonne in more than 3 weeks, so of course she questioned Brian. He said that Yvonne had found out about his child with Kristen and this had made her angry enough to leave him. In fact, he told anyone who asked that she had left with another man for Costa Rica. When the family looked into this story, the couple's landlord on the island off Panama verified that not long after the big fight, she, the landlord, had received an email from Yvonne's account saying that she had found out that Brian was a lying, cheating so-and-so and that she was headed off to spend some time in Costa Rica with a guy she'd met when they'd first arrived. This was not something that curbed Yvonne's family's concerns, though. Michelle told Brian that she wanted to go to the police to report her sister missing. And Brian said, whoa, hold up. Just let me try to reach out and see if I can get a hold of her. I'll ask her to get in touch with you. If she left you, dude, why would she be more inclined to respond to you than her family? But of course, surprise, surprise, not long later, Michelle did hear from her sister. Well, she received an email. In this email, Yvonne tells her that she will be home in a few weeks. There was a family reunion scheduled, and Yvonne says that she will do her best to be there. Michelle wrote back saying, "I'm so glad you responded. Didn't want to pry or bug, but I was worried. Wanted to make sure you weren't kidnapped and someone pretending it was you. Haha. Maybe I'm paranoid. Too much 48 hours. She received no joking reply though. In fact, there were no further emails from Yvonne despite the desperate pleas from her family that she contact them. Then, the 12th of January came around, the date of the family reunion, but Yvonne wasn't there. This is when the family knew there was something very, very wrong. Michelle began her own investigation. She had a relative look into the emails and where they were actually coming from, and they found that the most recent emails from Yvonne's account had been sent from Southern California. When they drilled down further, they found that they were specifically coming from where Brian was living. And this wasn't all they discovered. They found out that the person he was living with was the mother of his secret child, and now his new wife. Yep, within 2 days of being back in the States, Brian was engaged to Kristen Workoven, and they married that month. It was when she learned of the marriage that Michelle went to the police to tell them that she believed her sister had been murdered and to file a missing persons report. When the investigation began, the police found that the last time that Yvonne had been seen was shortly after the argument and fallout from her discovering Brian's emails to Kristen. Witnesses say they saw the pair heading to a boat dock. They were arguing and Brian was dragging Yvonne by the arm. Brian sticks to his story that Yvonne left him for someone else. Yvonne's bank card showed a transaction in Costa Rica around that time, but when Yvonne's family checked with the embassy in Costa Rica, they said that no one with that passport had entered the country. And the American embassy in Panama said that she had never left Panama. So her parents flew out to scout the area themselves. How heartbreaking. That is just devastating. Meanwhile, the FBI was speaking with Brian, but they had no evidence of a crime. All they had was circumstantial evidence, like reports that Brian had turned up with a whole lot of money and was shouting everyone in the bar in Panama and toasting to Yvonne after her disappearance. The investigators asked him outright if he had sent the emails impersonating Yvonne, and he said no. When investigators looked into the withdrawals from Yvonne's account in Costa Rica, they saw that they coincided with Brian's trip home by way of Costa Rica. Really, how stupid can a person be? Investigators found something else that Brian had taken to Panama but hadn't returned with, and that was a machete, of course. Who doesn't travel with a massive knife? Anyway, before heading back to the US, Brian gave the machete to a local to repay a debt. The man put it up for sale on a local buy, swap and sell site, and when Brian saw the listing, he left a comment under it saying, "This used to be mine. I brought it from the States. Don't worry, I only dismembered one stripper with it, so it's hardly used." Winky face. Seriously, winky face. The police track down the machete and bring it back to the States for testing, but it comes back clean. Yvonne's parents came back home after a year in Panama with no answers. The unfortunate part was that they were scheduled to leave right as a whole lot of bones were discovered on the island, and they had to leave. So they left thinking that they were leaving their daughter, feeling that they were leaving their daughter behind. And her mum just fell apart. She had a nervous breakdown, thinking that any minute they were going to get a call saying that these remains were her daughter. It turned out in the end that they were actually animal bones, but that doesn't take back that anguish and that, oh my goodness, I just can't imagine. Investigators were frustrated. After speaking with Brian, they knew he had more to do with Yvonne's disappearance than he was saying. When they checked his computer, they found that his search history wasn't actually his computer, it was Yvonne's computer, which was just one more thing. But they found his search history from the time Yvonne went missing was quite telling. He was looking up how to get blood out of a mattress. Brian was arrested in June of 2013 for obstructing justice and making false statements to federal officers during the investigation. Then around a month after Brian was arrested, news came out of Panama. On Tuesday, August 21, 2013, a local man had come across a military-style duffel bag while he was clearing a path in thick brush. When he opened the bag, a skull rolled out. The bag also contained other remains along with women's clothing. It wasn't long before the remains in the duffel bag were identified as Yvonne's. Unfortunately, what was found in the bag was not a complete skeleton. Brian's charges were upgraded to murder, and investigators continued working with Yvonne's family to build their case against him. However, in the time that Yvonne had been missing, Michelle, her sister, was diagnosed with breast cancer. Michelle was so focused on finding Yvonne and getting justice for her that she wasn't taking proper care of herself, and she missed a lump in her breast. By the time Yvonne's body was found, the cancer had spread and metastasized to her brain. Investigators sought an emergency deposition because she was a potential witness, because they didn't know how long she had or how long she would be cognizant. So Michelle gave her deposition. She sat across from the man she knew killed her sister and gave all the information she had. Afterwards, the team wheeled her back to her hotel room in her wheelchair, and she asked how she'd done. The lead investigator told her that she'd done great. Michelle went to sleep that night knowing there was nothing more she could do for her sister, and she never regained consciousness. Before going to trial, the machete was looked at again. This time, they removed the handle, and they found blood under it. It was confirmed by DNA testing that it was Yvonne's blood. Brian finally began talking when this evidence came to light. So 1 month before trial, Brian wound up pleading guilty. Brian's defense claims that 2 days after Thanksgiving, on the 26th of November 2011, the couple had a violent day-long fight before they went to a restaurant and bar. However, the fight continued and culminated in Yvonne pulling a knife. Brian fought back, beating Yvonne before getting hold of the knife and using it to fatally stab her in the back. Then, in his own words, Brian Brimmager says he dragged Yvonne into the bathroom and used his machete to dismember her body. Then, to make it look like she really did just run off with all her things, he also killed Georgia May, Yvonne's little dog. He never did work out how to get the blood out of the mattress, so he tossed it into the ocean. He bagged Yvonne's clothes, shoes, and jewelry and threw them out as trash. The prosecution says Brian broke Yvonne's nose and her teeth and stabbed her numerous times before he dragged her bleeding body to the shower, where he dismembered her. Hours after having hauled Yvonne's remains to the Panamanian jungle, Brian emailed a friend saying, quote, "Hey bro, what you up to? I got stories for days. I'm living on an island off the coast of Panama, loving life and living semper free." US District Judge Jeffrey T. Miller said, "This murder was particularly cruel and depraved. The lengths Mr. Brimmager went to avoid detection were particularly brazen and ultimately shattering to the Baldelli family. I dare say they will never recover. A day may never go by without them thinking of Miss Baldelli's murder and the images seared into their psyches." On the 25th of May, Brian was sentenced to 26 years in federal prison. This means there's no chance of parole, as it should be in all cases, as far as I'm concerned. He was fined $10,000 and also ordered to pay restitution to Yvonne's dad in the amount of $11,132. As for Kristen, Brian's wife, she had no idea that Yvonne even existed, and Yvonne's family gave her the benefit of the doubt in the beginning, believing that she was a victim of Brian's lies as well. But as the years went on, their sympathy waned. See, from the last reports, the two are still married, and she still visits Brian regularly. I'm happy that Yvonne's family got some closure and justice. A couple of days after the sentencing, they were able to lay Yvonne to rest. They essentially lost 2 daughters because of this man, which is just heartbreaking. But that, my friends, is all I have for you today. If the content in this case raised any concerns for you regarding your own relationship or that of a loved one, please reach out for help. There is a list of resources in the description box below. Please know that you are not alone. There is help out there. I thank you again for joining me this week, and until next time, please take care of yourselves and be kind to one another. Bye.